Hi class, in this lesson we're going to take a look at graphing polynomials, but this time we're not given the factors, so we have to find the factors. And we do that by factoring, unless it's a harder problem that doesn't factor, like this one that's coming up here. So we're going to take a look at this one first that does actually factor. So what we need to do is set it equal to 0, because we want to know when will this graph actually be on the x-axis, and that is when the y values will be 0. So we set it equal to 0. And factor. Well, they all have a common factor of x, so we can factor out an x, and then we'd be left over with x squared minus 5x, and then plus 6. Which means we can actually now factor using the magic x, and if you do that, you'll factor and get this x still comes down. This will be x minus 2 and x minus 3. Because negative 2 times 3 gives you 6, and negative 2 minus 3 gives you negative 5. Okay, so anyway, it factors to be that, which means I have roots at x equals 0, x equals positive 2, and x equals positive 3. So I can put those dots here, 0, 2, and 3. So this is now, at this step, the exact same place I was in the last lesson. Now I know that there was an x to the third, I know it was a positive, which means I'm going to start down here and end up here. So I can go ahead and connect these dots with something that looks like this. And that's what my graph will look like, and that's the graph I'm looking for in the lab. Okay, well that one's nice until we get to this problem. This problem, it doesn't help me out at all, because I can't factor it. It doesn't factor by any method. So what we have to do is go back to our last section, which taught us how to factor, or to find factors when we're not given any, which is the rational root theorem. I'm supposed to take this p and divide it by the possible q factors. Okay, so that's my plus or minus 40, and then all of its factors. So plus or minus 20, plus or minus 10, plus or minus 8, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 2, and plus or minus 1. Now, all of those have to be divided by plus or minus 1. But of course, that all just makes them the same thing that they are, so that doesn't make it any more complicated. And of course, we don't need to try that many numbers, because really only 3 of them are going to work. Well, that doesn't make you feel any better, but if you remember, I said that in all your problems, you're going to be nice enough to have either 1, -1, or 2 or -2 work. So we're just going to try those ones. So let's start with 1 in synthetic division. And their coefficients are 1, 12, 27, -40. Okay, so again, I'm trying 1 first. So we go ahead and bring our 1 down. Okay, 1 times 1 is 1. Then I add here, I get 13. 1 times 13 is 13. And then I add there, and then I get 40. 1 times 40 is 40. And of course, that gives me 0. So what that means is on the first try, thankfully, I ended up finding one of my roots. Okay, well, I need to find all my roots in order to graph it, because I need 3 of them. Okay, so what that means now is I'm hoping that this will actually factor. If it doesn't, I need to do some more work. So I put my x to the 0 power, x to the first, and x to the second. So this is really x squared plus 13x plus 40. So I get to ask myself in the magic x, is there a number that multiplies to be 40 that adds to be 13? And if I think hard enough, I might end up with 8 and 5. Because 8 times 5 is 40, and 8 plus 5 is 13. So this one does factor at this point, and so I don't have to do any more synthetic division. So I go ahead and put this over x, and this one over x, which means that this factors to be x plus 8 times x plus 5. So those are my last 2 factors. Now if I set those equal to 0, I'll find my actual 2 roots, which means that x is going to equal -8, and x will equal -5. So I have 3 roots, -8, -5, and the one that was up here, so x equals 1. Okay, so what I get to do now is use those to graph. So now in graphing this, I know that I'm going to be able to touch at 1, at -8, well, at -5 first, and then -8. Okay, and I know that this was an x to the 3rd power. My original problem was, okay, so x to the 3rd power, which means that this graph is going to go from down here to up here. Again, because it was a positive x to the third graph. If it was negative, it would be reverse. Okay. So that means my graph is going to look something like this. Okay. So very similar to the last problem I just did. It's just a little bit more work if they didn't give you a root to start with. You have to do the rational root theorem that we learned in the last lesson. Well, sorry, the last section, and actually try to find potential roots, and then use guess and check with synthetic division to get your next step where you can actually be able to factor. And hopefully at that step you will be able to factor using the magic X and find your last two roots. Okay? And then you'll be able to come up with a graph that looks like this one. Alright, if you have any questions, continue to email me, and I'll help you.